Picture this. It's Saturday night. Your phone is full of unanswered invitations, a birthday dinner, a rooftop gathering, a friend's housewarming, and instead of scrambling to get ready, you are sitting on your couch, wearing the same hoodie you've had on since Thursday, halfway through your second cup of tea, and you feel completely at peace. You're not hiding. You're not anxious. You're not even tired. You simply don't want to go. And the strange part is, that feels like the most honest thing about you. You know someone like that, don't you? Or wait, is that actually you? Because today, we're going to talk about the psychology of people who genuinely, deeply love staying home. Not the ones who are afraid of people, not the ones recovering from a rough week, but the ones for whom home isn't a retreat, it's a destination. And what's really going on inside their minds might surprise you. Most people see this as a flaw. The narrative around home-body culture is wrapped in words like lazy, antisocial, or the classic, you need to get out more. Society has been selling the idea that the good life is a busy life, packed calendars, weekend plans stacked too deep, and the bragging rights of saying, I've been so slammed lately. So if you're the person who declines Friday night plans to stay in and reorganize your bookshelf on purpose, and you actually feel better for it, you start to wonder, is something wrong with me? Here's the twist. The psychology says the opposite. The very traits that make someone love their home life, the sensitivity, the deep inner world, the ability to be alone without being lonely, these are also the exact same traits linked to emotional intelligence, creative output, and long-term life satisfaction. The gift is real, but so is the weight of living in a world that doesn't quite understand you. Psychology actually breaks down the love of home dwelling into two very different pathways, and understanding which one applies to you, or which combination, changes everything about how you relate to yourself. The first pathway is innate. Research in personality neuroscience shows that introverts, and many homebodies sit on this end of the spectrum, have nervous systems that are more easily stimulated by their environment. Their brains don't need external input to feel activated. The inner world is already rich enough. This isn't shyness, it's biology. It's the way certain people are wired from birth, the same way some people are born with sharper hearing and find loud concerts genuinely uncomfortable, not because they're weak, but because they're tuned differently. The second pathway is formed. For others, the love of home developed as a response, sometimes to unpredictable environments in childhood, sometimes to early experiences where the outside world felt unsafe or overwhelming. Home became the one place where the rules made sense, where there were no surprises, where you were in control. Over time, that feeling of safety crystallized into something that felt less like a coping mechanism and more like a preference, because it had been working so well for so long. Whether your love of home was born into you or built into you, you are not broken. You are not avoiding life. You are someone who learned, either by nature or by experience, that depth is found inward. And that is a remarkably human thing to do. Sign 1. The social battery calculation. The psychological concept here is called anticipatory cognitive load. Your brain begins spending social energy before you even leave the house. It's calculating how many people will be there, whether you'll need to make small talk, how loud it might get, and how long until you can reasonably leave. Here's what this looks like in real life. Someone invites you to a casual dinner party on Saturday. It's Tuesday, and you spend the next 4 days mildly dreading it, not because you dislike the people, but because a part of your brain is already preparing, rehearsing, and pre-exhausting itself for an event that hasn't happened yet. By the time Saturday arrives, you're already tired. The result is that staying home never really feels like giving up. It feels like making the sensible financial decision with a limited resource.
Except the currency is your energy. Sign 2. The ritual architecture. Psychologists call this environmental anchoring, the way we attach emotional states to specific physical contexts. For people who love their homes, this goes extraordinarily deep. The couch isn't just a couch. The specific mug. The lamp that casts the right kind of light. The order in which you do things on a Sunday morning. These aren't quirks, they are an architecture of calm that you have spent years constructing. The sign? You notice this most clearly when something disrupts the system. A friend borrows your favorite blanket and doesn't return it. Someone sits in your spot. You're at a hotel and the lighting is wrong. And you lie there thinking, I have a perfectly good bed at home. The result is that other environments, no matter how objectively nice, always feel like a lesser version of the one you've built for yourself. Sign 3, the interrupted depth problem. The concept is called flow state sensitivity, the state of deep, uninterrupted engagement that psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi famously described as the peak of human experience. People who love staying home often live for this state. Reading until 2 a.m. Falling down a research rabbit hole for 6 hours. Getting deeply absorbed in a creative project and losing track of time entirely. The sign? You notice a very specific kind of irritation when your flow is broken. Someone knocks on your door while you're deep in a book. Your phone buzzes 3 times while you're finally in a groove. The plans to quickly pop out for groceries end up costing you the entire afternoon's momentum, and the rest of the day feels somehow lost. The result is that you start unconsciously designing your life around protecting these windows of depth, and social obligations, which are unpredictable and time-consuming by nature, begin to feel like a genuine threat to the things that make you feel most like yourself. Sign 4, the guilt that arrives uninvited. This one has a name in psychology: cultural expectation dissonance. The gap between what you genuinely want and what you believe you're supposed to want. Most homebodies don't just stay home, they also feel quietly guilty about staying home. They answer, "What did you do this weekend?" with a little apologetic laugh, like they need to justify that they thoroughly enjoyed being nowhere. Here's the situation. You had a genuinely wonderful Saturday. You cooked something new, you finished that book you'd been reading for a month, you had a long video call with an old friend. But when Monday arrives and a colleague says, "Did you do anything fun?" you somehow feel the need to say, "Nothing much, just stayed in," as though it were a confession rather than a report. The result is a low-level internal friction, a sense that you should want different things than you want, which, over time, can quietly erode your sense of permission to simply be who you are. Sign 5, the paradox of chosen isolation. Here's the nuanced part that most people get wrong. Voluntary solitude, the deliberate choice to be alone, is psychologically completely different from loneliness. Loneliness is a perceived gap between the social connection you have and the social connection you want. Voluntary solitude is the presence of exactly the connection level you actually want, which for many homebodies is simply lower than the cultural average. The sign? You can spend an entire weekend alone and feel genuinely content. Then you can go to a dinner party for 2 hours and come home feeling like you ran a marathon. And then people ask you if you're lonely, and you honestly don't know how to explain that the answer is no, that somehow being around people made you feel more alone than being alone did. The result is a persistent gap between how you experience your inner life and how other people imagine it must feel, which leaves you constantly translating yourself into a language the world around you understands. Here's what nobody talks about, and this is the part that makes the difference between a homebody who thrives and one that gradually shrinks. When the love of home is never examined, the brain starts doing something extra. It starts making the gap between inside and outside feel larger than it actually is. Psychologists call this avoidance reinforcement. Every time you stay home and feel relief, your nervous system logs that as the threat was real and we escaped it. Not there was never a threat. Escaped it. Over time, your comfort zone doesn't stay the same size. It contracts. Slowly at first, the dinner parties become uncomfortable before they were just tiring. Then the smaller gatherings. Then the casual coffee with a friend you actually like. And because you're technically fine, still reading, still creative, still content, you don't notice the gradual narrowing until the day you realize that the world outside your front door has started to feel genuinely strange rather than simply unnecessary. There's also a second mechanism at work: identity fusion. When your home becomes not just where you rest, but the central expression of who you are, you start to conflate the comfort of the space with your sense of self.
Any disruption to that space, a move, a loud neighbor, a period of house guests, feels not just inconvenient, but existentially unsettling, as though something foundational has been shaken. This is the layer most people who love home never look at. And understanding it, without judgment, is what allows the preference to remain a strength rather than quietly becoming a wall. Let's be clear about something first. You cannot simply decide to stop loving your home. You cannot willpower your way into becoming someone who gets energized by crowded bars and back-to-back social plans. The solution is not to become less of who you are. The solution is to understand yourself clearly enough that you're making choices, not just running patterns. 1. Reframe the lens. The most important shift is learning to distinguish between preference and avoidance. Preference is you've genuinely considered the option, acknowledged what it might offer, and consciously chosen the alternative because it serves you better. Avoidance is the discomfort made the decision before you had a chance to. Both might look the same from the outside. You stay home either way. But internally, one leaves you feeling grounded and clear, and the other leaves a small residue of anxiety that you've learned to ignore. Start noticing which one is driving. 2. Calibrate the response. Build what some therapists call minimum effective doses of social engagement, not because you need to push yourself into discomfort constantly, but because the brain needs evidence that the outside world is manageable. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to events you hate. It means finding the smallest version of connection that still counts. A walk with one person you genuinely like, a phone call instead of a dinner, a commitment that lasts 90 minutes and has a clear end time. Done regularly, these teach your nervous system that venturing out is not a threat, and you return home not because you fled, but because you chose to. 3. Set boundaries that fit you. The goal is not to explain yourself to everyone. It's to stop explaining yourself to yourself. That internal apology, the quiet guilt about staying home on a Saturday, is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you've absorbed a standard that was never designed for you. Practice saying, simply and without footnotes, "I had a quiet weekend. It was really good." No justification, no deprecating laugh. You are allowed to enjoy your life in the exact shape that it takes for you, and communicating that calmly, without shame, tends to invite far more respect than people expect. The love of home doesn't disappear. It doesn't transform into something else entirely, but it does, with understanding, change shape. Think about a lighthouse, standing completely still while everything around it moves. It doesn't go out to sea, it doesn't chase ships, and yet, because it knows exactly where it is, and because it stays there, it becomes the thing that guides everything else home. That stillness is not passivity. That rootedness is not fear. It is a form of presence that the world quietly relies on, even when it doesn't know how to say so. Your home is not the place where life isn't happening. It might be exactly the place where your particular version of life happens best. The question was never whether you should be different. The question, the only one worth sitting with, is whether you understand yourself clearly enough to make that choice freely every single time. If any part of this video felt like someone had been reading your diary, leave a comment below and tell me, what is the one thing about staying home that you've never quite been able to explain to someone who doesn't get it? I want to read every single one. And if you know someone who calls themselves a homebody, or who you've been gently pressuring to come out more, maybe share this with them first before the next invitation. It might explain more than an hour of conversation would. One last thing. Drop your zodiac sign in the comments. I have a theory about which signs are most likely to have memorized the exact location of every comfortable corner in their home, and I want to see if I'm right.